So lofted woods, hybrids, long irons, what do they do? And at different speeds, what do they do? So what we're going to do today is look at a 9-wood at 24 degrees, a hybrid at 24 degrees, and a 4-iron at 24 degrees. And I'm going to swing them at two different speeds, 75 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour, and look at what does each club do differently at which speed. And then if you're basically at one of those, sort of broadly speaking, one of those speeds, sort of moderate or kind of stronger side, why might they be relevant for you? So we'll have a look at both of those speeds, look at the data, and hopefully make more relevant why you might pick one club over the other this coming season. So going to start off with a 4-iron. Initially going to look at 75 miles an hour club speed. Now, quite rightly you might say, well, is a 4-iron relevant at this speed? But a lot of players still play one or want to play one. It's diminishing with more and more tour players using higher loft hybrids. Freddie Couples using a 6 hybrid, for example. But we're going to start off with a 4-iron, work through the 3 different club heads at that moderate speed, do the same at 90 miles an hour, and then we'll deep dive through the data and then look at the relevance of each club. We're going to start off with a 4-iron at the moderate speed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow myself a little bit of tolerance on club speed, because this isn't about a specific mile an hour, it's about being moderate and stronger. So going to give myself a couple of miles an hour either side of 75, just because that's really hard to hit 75 dead every time. So let's start off with the 4-iron, get a few shots with this, and we'll move on to the hybrid and then on to the fairway wood. Let's do one more there. So constantly monitoring the club speed to make sure that I'm putting a relevant swing on. So you can see from those, quite a low flight is exactly what we'd expect out of the long iron. Let's see if we move up to hybrid, how does that change things? So moving from 4-iron to hybrid, we'll keep that 75 mile an hour club speed, but how much of a difference in ball flight, carry, all those things we're going to see, let's find out. So really a case of trying to keep my delivery as consistent as possible with each club. I'm not trying to hit them differently being a wood, a hybrid or an iron. So try and keep that same angle of attack and delivery pattern as we did the 4-iron. Straight away, it feels easier to collect the ball. I think at a kind of a moderate speed, that just felt like it got into the ball a lot more easily, and that's one of the things between a 4-iron and a hybrid that we'd always expect to see is more forgiveness. Came out a little flat, maybe got on top of that. Yeah, got on top of that a little bit too much. Got to shallow out a bit. We're on speed there, 74, okay. 5 down. I think what I can notice hitting these is consistency of strike and ball speed. It certainly feels a lot easier to collect the ball. So at 75, I'll give that one more just so we've got the same batch of 5 shots. But yeah, much easier from a contact point of view. Let's pop that one a little bit. But so the last one wasn't a great strike, so I'll filter out any irrelevant shots, but got 4 or 5 solid ones there. But much easier to get that ball, feeling-wise, getting into the bottom of the ball, collecting it. I think at a lower speed, the irons just are, there's a thinner sole there, and just with less speed, there's less lift, there's less guts to the strike, and it feels like the iron head gets affected by that more than the hybrid. So as we move on to the wood, does that help even further? So 9-woods is something that more and more players, even tour players, have been playing. So really relevant to be looking at this now, because it's something that we're doing many more in fittings. So comparing it at these speeds in particular, this is where we're going to see, be quite interesting to see what it does relative to the hybrid and the 4-iron from a trajectory, but also ball speed point of view as well. So now obviously shaft length is that bit longer, and that's the one thing that the hybrid has, is that slightly shorter shaft from a consistency point of view, to feel just that little bit easier to strike versus a 9 wood. But straight away, that's up in the air. So, you know, noticeably higher launch out of that. A little fast club speed though, so let's tone that back a bit. So for me, I've got to rein my swing back quite a bit with this club to get to this speed. But again, yeah, versus the iron, just feels easier to get through the bottom of the ball and collect it. And again, plenty of height on that as well. Not necessarily my finest strike, but a lot of elevation there. If I can get the contact with that flight too. Yeah, there's really noticeable elevation on this. So I'm going to do one more here. Right. It's a bit of a more solid hit, came out a bit lower, but you know, again, both the hybrid and the wood relative to the iron, just don't notice the mishit as much. And I think that's a really, really key thing. You know, where we're looking at these as a sort of a distance fairway shot at the moderate speeds, you know, something that you're likely to have to use quite a lot during the round, because if you're moderate speed with a hybrid, you're moderate with the driver, therefore you're hitting more club into greens. So getting something that gives consistency of results, that's really, really important. So it'll be fascinating as we go through these. I'm going to go ramp the speed up. We're going to go through the same 3 batches of hits with the iron, the hybrid and the fairway wood, and then we'll compare where they sit relative to one another, both at those 2 speeds, but then between the 2 speeds, and really kind of give an indication on what's useful and why you might use one versus the other. So some quite interesting differences here. The one bit that doesn't change quite as much as I might have expected it to is the spin. So as you can see, I've managed to keep the club speed, you know, within, on average, within 1 mile an hour of target speed 75. So this isn't about an exact speed, but it's about a kind of moderate swing speed range. What we can see from 4 iron to 4 hybrid of 9 wood, I've not taken any of the shots out of each of these, so these are all the hits I've just done, is that there is a gradual increase in, yeah, well, certainly over the 4 iron to the 4 hybrid, then there was one kind of popped up kind of dead shot with the 9 wood, which has just reduced that a bit, but we're seeing, you know, ball speed gain. Interestingly enough, spin has only really developed, well, hasn't really developed. So that what that goes to show is, now granted, I've managed to get the launch angle actually fairly high with the 4 iron, higher than I might have expected. So, you know, relatively speaking, I might have expected to see the 4 iron come out a little bit lower. Now, you know, from a technique point of view, if you do struggle technique-wise and strike-wise, that's where the 4 iron might well fall off a little bit more. But we've delivered very similar angle of attack, very similar path, very similar face to path. I've managed to deliver good loft there. So it's actually launched fairly well. But, you know, 4 hybrid to 4 iron, for me, on this test, not a huge difference, but the ball speed's up. So really at a moderate speed, you're trying to get height and ball speed gain, to get carry distance. So at this kind of speed, we can see the 9 wood is almost 2 degrees higher launch. And whilst the spin's the same, that's resulting in 8 yards of carry gain. So, you know, when you're sort of down the lower end of the club speed kind of category, your launch angle is massively key. The spin rate itself, the carry distance, unless it goes really through the floor, isn't going to massively affect carry distance. But launch angle and height, you know, 10 foot more between the 9 wood and the 4 iron, and, you know, 3 or 4 foot, 3 foot between the hybrid and the 4 iron, you know, that extra 10 foot, that extra 1.5 degrees of launch angle, that helps it through the air that little bit more. So going to something that gets it up quickly at the moderate speed, that is where the difference is, and that's really important when you're looking at that transition from irons into woods. Make sure you've got launch angle. Without that, you don't have carry. So let's move up to 90 miles an hour, see how that changes. So moving up to 90 miles an hour, this will be a little bit closer, certainly with an iron, to my more natural speed, but we'll see how much that flight changes. I say I was quite surprised at how little the spin rate develops through those woods, 4-iron to hybrid to 9 wood, but obviously launch angle increased quite a bit. So let's see what happens at the higher speed. A little bit heavy there, but automatically that just feels like there's a little bit more guts getting the ball up and out with the iron. At low speed, even though it launched quite well, it felt like it just wanted to fall out the sky a little bit. We're still going to have the same development in forgiveness through the irons, the hybrid to the fairway wood, margin of error. So 4-iron still, really still for, you could argue a fairly kind of high skill level player, or a higher ball in principle for a higher ball hitter. Now this is a slightly higher launching 4-iron, so it's not a low spin cannon, but in order to get a 4-iron at 24 degrees, it's got to be quite a traditional, it's a traditional loft, so T100 is helping it with a little bit of flight. So versus some of the other heads that we could have used, but we've had to add an awful lot of loft to get it to the same loft as the hybrid and the fairway would. All right, not a great strike, but I'll give that one more. Again, that's part of it. That's a bit necky, and that's really dropped a load of ball speed. So, okay. So again, noticeable, a slight miss hit. I can feel the head and twisting and moving a little bit, so that's quite affected. So it's quite natural speed for me, this with a 4-iron, so it's quite comfortable to achieve that speed. And pretty good actually. If you're looking for what we wanted from a 4-iron ball flight, that kind of just under, pushing 4,000 on spin, 15 launch is pretty good, 90 feet. They're all quite nice numbers. But how much that change as we kick on up to the hybrid? Well, let's give it a hit and see. So if you're enjoying the content and you're liking the comparison between the different heads, we've got this video here about the unsung heroes versus the established kind of big brands that hopefully you can find interesting and provide a bit of value for looking at driver heads in the future. So I'd expect to see a little bit more of a development on that spin rate at higher speed. At this higher speed, you get a little bit more friction on the face, so that should affect the spin rate a little bit more, or noticeably more, than it did at 75 miles an hour. So if you think we've gone up 20% in terms of club speed, do we see a proportionate change in spin and height as we move into the more wood-like clubs from the 4-iron? See where club speed is. Yeah, pretty good. So that's still a darn sight easier to collect off the top. But already from that swing, I can see quite a change in spin rate. Where my action over the years has shallowed out a little bit, you're still hitting down it a little bit, but the more you pick it, the more comfortable the hybrids and the fairway woods are to get off the turf. That's really where they're aimed at, to get into the bottom of the ball and get that flight up. Yeah, again, noticeably a much higher flight. So as the speed's kicking up, obviously we'll go into the details a little bit more shortly. I can already see from the shot numbers there, it's a vast difference in spin and height compared to what we saw at 75 miles an hour. Let's just do the one more there. Right. Yeah, so, and where this isn't what you call kind of high speed, with a hybrid high speed, you're up over 100 miles an hour. 90 for a long iron's fairly strong, but obviously you want to keep them at the same mile an hour across each club head, because so that it's a relevant test rather than kind of proportionate speeds. But yeah, a much bigger, that last shot was a bit less spin, but a much bigger change in spin and launch. We're at 16, 17 degrees of launch out of this versus 15 with the 4-iron, and spin's getting up high 4,000s versus high 3,000s. A bit more, maybe a bit more variation depending on strike point, but really you're going into hybrids or woods to get that elevation up. Launch angle at low speed, but spin at a slightly higher speed being a big differential. So is that going to kick up much more again with the 9-wood? So up to the 9-wood. This, so many more of these we're doing this year. Where does it send my flight to 90 miles an hour? Yeah, it's interesting how visually with this size of head, how much more loft you can see. Just the scale of the head showing you the face that little bit more, which for a lot of players could be quite confidence inspiring. Little Healy. Where am I on speed? Okay, a little high on speed. Okay, let's just bring that back a couple of miles an hour. I get a notable amount of height there. 92. Not the best contact, but a lot of launch. Always we want to moderate the speed, okay. Yeah, so spin at the moment, not wildly different to the hybrid, but again, looking at that launch angle, there's that little bit more height again. It's a better contact, so, okay, 89, yeah, I'll give that one more there. But I think this is where we're seeing, this year in particular, the spin rates on the woods getting a little bit lower, which for these sort of lofts means they don't balloon too much. Touch heavy, but lots of elevation there. So as I was just saying, the woods this year, particularly the pings, the 430 would have spun more than this. This head's getting tremendous amount of launch, but we're seeing lower spin. So from a distance point of view, a little bit stronger. But if you're looking for added spin, the current models actually are slightly lower than they have been in the past in the majority of heads. So spin rate is still, it's launch and spin, but not quite as high as they used to be. But we are seeing higher launch angles. Now, higher launch, lower spin means more total distance, so which is where they've gone for with it. But yeah, plenty of elevation, so let's get that comparison done. So at the higher speed, what do we find there at 90 miles an hour? So more of the kind of stronger mid side of things. So one, ball speed progression, again noticeable. 4-iron, 140 efficiency, 146 for the hybrid, so I struck that one much better, and 142 for the 9-wood. Now the only thing I wonder a little bit with this, I struggle to find the strike quite as much, but for me is that it could be at that much loft, whether I'm getting it higher up the face than some players would. No pun intended. And that just dropped me a little bit of ball speed. But what we do see is that same kind of launch angle progression. So like we saw at the moderate speed, just under 16 for the 4-iron and actually the hybrid. But the 9-wood up at 17.3. So we've picked up, again, 1.5 degrees of launch angle. So exactly the same loft of head. We measured those all beforehand. All of them exactly at 24 degrees. We can't blame. You can maybe say, is the hybrid a bit low because angle of attack's that little bit steeper, but for the 4-iron and the 9-wood, identical angle of attack. So I've not delivered through angle of attack a different loft. So we're seeing that purely from the dynamics of the head. But again, spin rate's gone up, so we have got more launch. We have got a little bit more spin certainly on the hybrid, and we've got a bit more spin and noticeable more launch on the 9-wood. So, but I don't think this is quite as much as we would have seen in previous years. With older heads at 9-wood, I think we'd have seen spin flare up a little bit more. But what does that actually mean from a height point of view? Well, between these two, we've got another 17 feet, another 6 yards of flight height. So again, what are we looking to really affect? And granted, this is the higher spin 4-iron head, so other heads will bring spin down more than this, but we're still seeing, at this speed, we're starting to get reasonable flight out the 4-iron. I've added land angle in here. So we're up at 44.5 degrees. That's enough to start getting control. So if you're looking to get stopping power with any iron, or any club really, the magic number of 45 is in an ideal world where we'd want to get to. But you do also need the caveat to that is you need a certain amount of club speed in order to achieve that in the first place. So there's a little bit of it's not only go for that number, there are kind of other layers behind that. But we're up 10% in land angle with both the hybrid and the fairway wood. The fairway wood through launch angle and the hybrid through spin. So the spin's kind of keeping the ball at the top of the flight, so peaking at 110 feet, and with the 9 wood, the launch angle's getting it up there quick, but proportionately the spin for me on this batch hitch wasn't quite as high. I would expect on some players to see the spin a little higher on the fairway wood to the hybrid. And it was like, for me on this batch of hits, probably strike point on the face, it's not quite as high. But still picking up plenty, 10% in terms of steepness of landing, which is going to help if you're playing as an approach shot to the green. That's going to help it hold the green. So similar kind of uplift in terms of that land angle, height, launch and spin as we saw at moderate speed. So actually perfectly relevant and similar increases in launch angle and spin at 90 miles an hour as we saw at 75. I'm going to add the 75 mile an hour shots onto this as well, and then we'll get it so that they sit next to one another. So what do we see, what does the club speed do? Well, at 4 iron, I'm just going to slide this across so we've got land angle there. At 4 iron, a degree more launch, 500 revs more spin. But the ball speed gain of 20 miles an hour from the 15 mile an hour club speed gain, that's taken the flight from 53 feet to 95, 33 land angle to 44. All of a sudden, that's a relevant club for that kind of flight. 4 iron at 33 land angle, 14 degrees launch, 3.5 revs of spin. Unless you just can't strike the longer shaft on the hybrid or the fairway wood, not a particularly relevant club because it makes the carry distance hard to get consistency. The moment the club speed goes up, it's up there. There's plenty of carry, plenty of flight, as long as you're confident with and like hitting that slightly stronger flight that an iron's going to give you at that loft. That's a perfectly relevant club at 90 miles an hour. Move up to the hybrid, scroll the screen down. Again, relevant strikes to one another, ball speed gain of 25 miles an hour this time. So because there's more speed off the face, the uplift in ball speed is that little bit more, even for the same relevant club speed gain. So going from 75 to 91 there. Degree and 1.3 degrees launch angle, spins up 900 revs. Now, that's a more significant gain. Now we're starting to look at that spin giving a lot more stopping power. So we went up 10 degrees on the 4 iron in land angle, we've gone up 14 here. From 56 feet height, 56 feet in height, so 19 yards, we're up at 110. So now we're up at 37 degree yards of flight height. So plenty of height, towering ball flight. Spin rise, what you might see on a 5 iron. So a lot more stopping power. That really is stopping when it hits a green. Whereas at 75 miles an hour, that's still running out quite a lot. And now we move up to the 9 wood. Okay, club speed gain 76 to 92. Ball speed, similar kind of 22 mile an hour gain. 1 degree of launch, but again spin up 900 revs. So the hybrid and the fairway wood, the spin and launch angle gain pretty similar, but the 9 wood starts from a higher base. On the 9 wood and the hybrid, you're looking at a 45 yard gain in carry, 40 yard gain in carry for the 9 wood there. But land angles up 12 degrees. So you've got another 60 feet of height, 63 to 112 foot, 50 feet of height. So a huge gain in actual height, huge gain in stopping power. So really what we're saying is at moderate speed, launch angle maximizes carry distance, but gives you the best chance of getting the most carry and the most consistency of distance. And for some players it might be a hybrid, some might be a 9 wood, but the more wood-like head versus an iron, noticeably more height. As the speed goes up, it's about what job does it want to do. The hybrid's actually carried, for me, because the strike was better, it's actually carried 3 yards further. So it's not, you can get the ball popping up too much at higher speeds when you go too much loft. So comparing the 9 wood at 196, 4 hybrid at 199, 4 iron 192, it's actually, ironically, still a similar distance gain as you got at the moderate speed. So proportionally, it's a much smaller gain because of the, the distance. You're looking at 7 yards over 190 to 200 yard gain versus, I think we said 10 yards, 8 yards at 150 to 160. So the proportionate gain is bigger at the lower speed. But the job roll is very different at the higher speed. The job roll, the spin rate's gone up, 10 to 15%. I say height's gone up, 20 feet. All of a sudden you're talking about one coming in with a bit of strength and one really going up and moonballing. And then what you want the club to do, the kind of course you play, plays more of a role. The strategy call plays more of a role. At moderate speed, it's about consistency of carry distance, and that becomes the priority at low speed. So I hope that gives that little bit of an insight. You start to get into different layers of strategy calls at the higher speed versus actually at moderate speed, it's about what are we trying to do from a carry distance and get that distance progression and consistency of gain club to club through the set. Is it worth having a 9-wood and a 4-hybrid in the bag, for example? Absolutely not. But how much more user-friendly does that become versus a long iron? And at the top end, it's about where do I play, what flight do I want, what job roll do I want at that carry distance, because there are 2 or 3 different options in there that really, depending on the course you play and the type of shot you want to hit, you could use all 3. But in windy conditions, the high flight's really not a lot of use. In windy conditions, the lower flight's great. In calm conditions with water short of the green, the lower flight's not quite as useful, the higher flight's great. So it's that kind of decision. Moderate speed, it's what gives me relevant carry distance. So hopefully really useful. If you like this kind of content, let us know. We'll do more of it. Let us know what you want us to test as well. It's always useful to know what you want. We just want to provide you with the content that is useful and relevant and that you want to see. So if you like this, subscribe, hit the like button, but also let us know what you'd like to film in the future, and we will absolutely do it for you. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.